Chapter 1171. News of the assassination attempt on Mason was suppressed. No one except those on the scene when it happened knew about it. An attempt on his life happened as soon as he appeared in public. So, Mason wouldn't be appearing in public anytime soon. He would even be working in the Heath residence. Crystal clung to Mason. "Dad, I'm so scared. Someone tried to kill you twice." "Don't worry, I'm fine." It was rare for Crystal to be so well behaved. Mason reached out and patted her on the head. "You've really been spoiled rotten all these days. You're an adult now. You should learn to be more like your brother. To become as emotionless and dense as him." Mason sighed. "You little brat. I mean, you should learn to be more mature and sensible. Or else someone would take advantage of you." Simply put, Crystal was very dumb. Even if she weren't spoiled, she wouldn't really become a capable person. If someone were to take advantage of her, things would be different. The 3-month deadline wasn't a great plan, but he didn't have a choice under those circumstances. Crystal had to stand her ground these coming months to prevent herself from being corrupted by Yale. But it was clear that Crystal didn't listen to a single word he said. "Dad, I know that. By the way, Vanessa saved your life twice. I would like to host a banquet to thank her. I thought you hated her. These are two different things. She saved you. It's only natural for me to show her some gratitude. We should invite Ethan, too, to show our appreciation for him." "Sure, since you are so thoughtful for once, I'll be content if you can get along with her in the future. I'll leave the preparations to you." For a moment, Mason felt like his daughter had matured. She wasn't as obstinate as she used to be. Crystal invited the Kingstons, Ethan, and some others. When Olivia caught wind of the banquet, her first reaction was that Crystal was up to something. The last time she hosted a banquet, she drugged Olivia and Ethan. She couldn't possibly pull the same trick again, right? Olivia couldn't possibly believe that Crystal actually wanted to thank her. People never change. Crystal hated her. She was sure to try something during the banquet. Olivia had a feeling that Crystal was plotting something against her. But if she didn't attend, she would seem suspicious. After giving it some thought, Olivia figured she just had to watch what she ate. Crystal wouldn't actually poison her, right? Besides, she was already immune to most poisons. So, after thinking about it, she decided to attend. This banquet was a smaller one. Around 20 people would be attending. There were almost no outsiders. Most of them were people from the Benson and Kingston families. Ethan's parents weren't in the country, so Ethan was the only person from the Miller family to attend. When they noticed that Yale would also be coming, Olivia knew something was wrong. Crystal used to hate Yale. It would be impossible for her to suddenly fall in love with him. The only reason they suddenly became close could only be because they shared a common goal. And what goal would the two of them share? Ethan could already roughly guess what they were up to. Even Linus could feel that there was something weird about the banquet. "Vanessa, this is a toast in your honor. I apologize for being rude to you in the past. I also thank you for saving my father." Olivia raised her glass. "You're too kind, Miss Heath. Other than showing my gratitude, I have something I wanted to ask you about." There it was. "Oh, what do you want to ask me about other than medical issues?" Olivia said calmly. She was completely unfazed. Chapter 1172. Crystal walked up to Olivia. "Come here, let's talk it out." Olivia was also curious to see what Crystal wanted to do. Mason's expression darkened. "What are you trying to pull, Crystal?" Then, he looked at Tatiana because he thought it was her idea. Tatiana said resignedly, "Mason, I have nothing to do with this. I don't know what she's up to." It was the truth. She had been thinking of what she should do in the past couple of days. She would never make a move without being sure that she would succeed. Seeing what was going on, Tatiana could guess what Crystal had done. She definitely told Yale, and it was all Yale's idea. They wanted to expose Olivia before everyone. It would be great if everything went according to plan, but they didn't have any proof that Olivia had any malicious intent. At least from the information that they had, they couldn't really prove that Olivia bore any ill will toward Mason. The things they had done already disappointed Mason. If they messed up again, they would lose his trust. Tatiana quickly called Crystal over. Crystal, what are you doing? Just come and enjoy the food. I'm sorry, everyone. My daughter was just trying to liven things up. You're right, Mrs. Heath. The Kingstons were quick to agree with her. There was no going back for her since she was already at this step of her plan. She had to show Ethan that Olivia was a witch, like her daughter, who could control snakes. She planned to vent all the frustration she had pent up since their first encounter at the village. Calm down, everyone. I just have one question. Vanessa was the one who saved my father at the Maritime Museum. That's a fact, right? Miss Heath, we saw it with our eyes. This is definitely true. Ethan could already guess where she was going with that. Enough of this. Why, Ethan, I just want to reveal her true colors to you. She's not as good as you think she is. Olivia chuckled. I wonder what kind of woman I am in your eyes, Miss Heath. You're the same as your daughter. You're both witches. Monsters. Enough, Crystal. Dad, Linus, have the two of you never questioned why her face is spotless even though the bullet grazed her cheek? Linus already knew the truth, but Mason didn't. Everything happened too quickly that day. Even he wasn't sure if the bullet hit Olivia. What are you trying to say? Dad, I checked a lot of high-definition videos in private. I can confirm that the bullet grazed her face. There can only be one reason why. That's not her face. She was in a disguise. Crystal stared at Olivia. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Olivia figured that Crystal was so confident because she already had proof. So, she didn't try to talk her way out of it. I don't have anything to say. Crystal was delighted. She clapped her hands and said, then let's see who you really are. Two maids holding a bucket of water each poured the water on Olivia abruptly. Ethan saw that and rushed to pull Olivia into his arms. He blocked most of the water for her. Ethan, what are you doing? The mask on her face will be warped when it touches water. Olivia pushed Ethan away lightly and looked at everyone calmly. Do you really want to know who I am so badly? Mason stood up. Vanessa, what are you? That's right. This is not my true appearance. Miss Heath, since you want to look, I have nothing to hide. I just hope you won't regret your decision. Olivia raised her hand to remove her mask. Chapter 1173. Crystal started to feel uneasy when she saw that Olivia was so calm. She talked like they knew each other. She thought long and hard but didn't know who Olivia could possibly be. It was impossible. She was definitely bluffing. Crystal swore she wouldn't fall for it anymore. Tatiana and Mason looked at each other. Neither of them knew what was going to happen. Olivia touched the soaked edges of her mask and slowly removed it. It was because she had been wearing a mask for extended periods of time. The skin that was revealed was ashen. Olivia's chin was pointed. She didn't put anything on her lips, but they were naturally pink. Her nose was small and refined. It was the type of nose many people would want to get plastic surgery to have. Her forehead was full and glowing. Her eyes were big and bright. When Crystal saw Olivia's face, she was reminded of the first time she saw Olivia 3 years ago. She was injured, and her hair was a mess. She stood in the corridor. Her slim frame looked beautiful with a hint of desolation. As a woman, Crystal was jealous of Olivia. How could she be so stunning? A simple frown would make people feel bad for her. She finally understood why Ethan was willing to give up anything for her, even his life. That was the face of a vixen. Crystal felt jealous and angry. That was why she slapped Olivia in public. Back then, Olivia couldn't do anything but look at Crystal. Crystal had wanted to show her the difference between their status. That was the only thing she had over Olivia. Several years had passed. She laid eyes on Olivia's face yet again. The feeling of desolation was gone. Olivia was like a radiant sun. She was cheerful and confident. Olivia stood at a height that even Crystal couldn't reach. She was a respected doctor that even her father was in awe of. Crystal took a couple of steps back. This wasn't the result she had envisioned. So, she was in shock. She murmured, "How could it be you?" Yale didn't expect the person he was plotting against to be Ethan's ex-wife, either. Mason's fork fell onto his plate as he stared blankly at Olivia's face. You are. Tatiana had never seen Mason display such an expression. A feeling of unease flashed in her heart. Mason. Mason ignored her as he broke free of her grasp and walked straight toward Olivia. His gaze never left her face, even for a moment. His eyes were filled with too many complicated emotions. There was excitement, joy, and disbelief. He didn't even dare to blink. It was like he thought Olivia would vanish into thin air if he closed his eyes. Olivia could tell that he saw another person when looking at her. Who did he see? The short distance between them seemed very long to him. The woman's youthful appearance was all that was going through his mind. The young man grabbed her sleeve with a bright smile. Nat, I will never let you down. Nat, you're the most beautiful woman in the world. You're a goddess. Nat, don't treat me like a kid. Nat, I love you. I really love you. Nat, when I become rich, I will make you the most revered woman in the world. Nat, I'm sorry. Tears welled up in Mason's eyes. He slowly reached out and said sorrowfully, Is it you? You're back, right? Chapter 1174. Everyone could see that there was something wrong with Mason. Tatiana started to panic. She had never seen him in such an unsightly state in all the years she had been married to him. Who was this woman? Tatiana wasn't the only one who thought Mason was looking at Olivia with a weird expression. Everyone else thought the same. Naturally, Ethan felt that, too. He wrapped his arms around Olivia. Both of them were soaked and looked a little downtrodden, but his gaze was cold. Mr. and Mrs. Heath, as you can see, she's Olivia, my ex-wife. She's not anyone suspicious. She just wants to keep a low profile and not stand out. She only came to perform the operation because I begged her to do so. I didn't expect her kindness to be repaid with such insults. Miss Heath has tried to humiliate her repeatedly. We endured all of that because we cared about Mr. Heath's health. This time, she pulled yet another trick to humiliate Liv publicly. I'm sorry, but I can't bear to see her being humiliated time and again. Since your recovery has been coming along well, you should find yourself another doctor. Olivia was only partially soaked, but Ethan was completely drenched. He dragged Olivia away with a stormy expression. No one expected things to go down like that. Linus walked up to them. It's cold out. You should get changed, or you'll catch a cold. We can talk about other stuff later. Ethan's temper flared up. There's nothing to talk about. I'll be leaving. He ignored everyone as he took Olivia away. A gust of chilly wind blasted toward them when he opened the door. Although Olivia was only partially soaked, she still felt chilly. But Ethan remained expressionless. Are you cold? I'm not. I have spare clothes in the car. Calvin already had the air conditioner on and the clothes prepared in advance. Only Olivia's jacket was wet. So, she took it off and dried her hair. Ethan changed into a new set of clothes. Let's go home. Ethan was in a bad mood. He disrespected Linus in front of a crowd. That was how angry he was. Olivia held his hand and swayed it. Relax. Ethan pulled her into his embrace. I'm sorry, Liv. I shouldn't have brought you here. Olivia nestled against his chest. Maybe I should thank you. The picture in the tea room and Mason's expression when he looked at her made Olivia sure that he knew Miss Nat. Why, Mr. Heath knows Miss Nat. I saw a picture in his tea room. It was the same as the old picture we saw. I have a feeling that we have a new lead, Olivia whispered. Back in the Heath residence, Mason didn't stop Ethan when he left with Olivia. Ethan was right. Olivia saved his life twice. They didn't owe the Heath family anything. On the other hand, Crystal and Tatiana had been making Olivia's life difficult. Crystal even did something like that in public just a moment ago. It was an insult to both Ethan and Olivia. Mason was furious, but he had already suppressed all his emotions. I'm sorry, everyone. Crystal has ruined this banquet. I'm feeling unwell, so I will be heading home to rest. Linus, Yale, take care of the guests for me. All right, Father. Crystal was a disgrace, but they couldn't do the same. As for Yale, he felt extremely uneasy. He had wanted to put Ethan on the spot, but the miracle doctor turned out to be his ex-wife. Mason didn't say anything to him, but he would definitely remember this. He told them to tend to the guests, but what he really meant was for him to fix the mess. Chapter 1175. Crystal was dumbfounded. Why did things end up like that? Ethan would hate her even more after that. Although Mason didn't reprimand her, she was scared by the look he gave her when he left. Mason had been very busy for as long as she could remember. She only got to see him a couple of times each year. Even if he weren't present, he would send all the nice things to her place. She could also feel his fatherly love. She grew up in a happy environment. When Mason rose to prominence, she became like a princess. Everyone around her doted on her. But she messed up again and caused Mason to be disgusted at her. Tatiana went with Mason and tried to appease him. "Mason, there's still some food in the kitchen. I'll get the housekeeper to get you some. You haven't completely recovered yet. You could use the nourishment." Mason was holding a string of prayer beads in his hand. The beads looked well worn. He would hold these beads whenever he was feeling upset. It would calm him down. He was like a volcano that was about to erupt. All he needed was a final spark. "I'm not hungry. Get out." He kept his emotions in check because he didn't want his family to be upset as well. He endured the negative emotions alone. But Tatiana had to bring it up. Ethan didn't have to do that. Tending to you isn't something shameful. He didn't have to hide her. Crystal was just afraid that she was someone with ulterior motives. She had good intentions. Her words only served to further anger Mason. He broke the porcelain cup before him at the mention of Crystal's name. The cup was part of his favorite set, but it had been smashed to pieces. He lost the last shred of patience he had for Crystal. "What do you mean good intentions? Do you really think she was trying to help? She made a fool of our family. I could forgive her past mistakes because she was young, but how many more mistakes is she going to make? This thing today isn't something Crystal is capable of planning. It has to be Yale. It's his move against Ethan. Would it have happened if she didn't agree to it? She's just dumb. She believed everything other people told her." Mason sneered. "My child couldn't possibly be so dumb. Since she likes to hang out with Yale, she can do that all she wants. I'll disown her. Didn't Yale say he liked her? Let's see how much he likes her when she's no longer a Heath." "Disown her? Are you crazy, Mason? What unforgivable crime did she commit?" Tatiana raised her voice. Then, she added, "Or is it that you're interested in that Fordham woman? Anyone could tell you looked at her weirdly just now. You shameless geezer. Are you actually going to abandon your daughter for an outsider?" Crystal pushed the door open violently. She had intended to apologize, but she didn't expect to hear what her mother said. She blurted out, "What? Dad, you're so old. How can you be interested in a woman in her 20s? Do you have no shame?" Mason slammed his hand on the table. The string of prayer beads snapped, and the beads were scattered all over the floor. "Will you ever shut up?" Mason looked up at Crystal with a piercing and chilling gaze. Crystal felt a chill down her spine when she met his gaze. She would rather Mason scold her or punish her. Anything was better than those unfeeling eyes. It was like he was looking at a complete stranger. Her cocky attitude was gone in an instant. She whispered, "Dad, from this day on, you're no longer my daughter. Pack your things and leave my house." What are you saying, Dad? "I'm saying that I want to disown you." Chapter 1176. Crystal was stunned. Her expression quickly changed. What was her father saying? She felt like she had to have heard wrongly. "Dad, isn't that too much? You're cutting ties with me because I poured some water on her." Mason sat in his chair with a stormy expression. He didn't shout, but he was still very intimidating. Crystal and Tatiana didn't even dare to look him in the eye. "Back in the day, it was dangerous to be around me. I was afraid you might be harmed. So, I had your mother take you to the countryside. Then, I became really busy with work and didn't have time to educate you. I never expected you to become such a despicable person. Do you really think I don't know what you have done?" Mason began to recount all the things she had done. "You had terrible grades as a student. Then, you decided to enlist and told me you wanted to serve your country. I knew you made that decision because of your feelings for Ethan. I thought the military would toughen you up. But what did you do? You were lazy and manipulative. You stole other people's achievements for yourself. No one dared to speak up because of your status. They even had to go along with whatever you said. 7 years ago, an entire special forces unit was annihilated because of your stupidity. Do you know how much time is needed to train such a unit? Do you know how many families you ruined? It was all to protect a fool like you. Mason really cared about talented people. He clutched his chest and said with a pained expression, "You treated others like trash. I didn't reprimand you too harshly because you were young. But after I transferred you back here, you forced a nurse to commit suicide because she made some small talk with Ethan while dressing his wounds. You're dumb and evil. Why do I have a daughter like you?" Mason listed all the things she had done over the years one by one. Tatiana and Crystal's faces both paled. They thought he was too busy to look into these things, but the fact was he knew more than Tatiana did. "Mason, don't be angry. You have to watch out for your health." As soon as Tatiana spoke up, Mason turned his rage toward her. He pointed his finger in her face and said, "You really did a good job educating her. You never reprimanded her when she did something wrong. You would clean up her mess without any complaints. You always defended her fiercely when I tried to talk some sense into her. You're the one who made her the way she is today. I've tolerated her mistakes repeatedly, but she never learned her lesson. She only became more unhinged due to her status. She attacks people verbally and physically as she pleases. I know what she did the day I underwent surgery. I would have been dead if Olivia hadn't been so forgiving. She saved my life, but instead of showing appreciation toward her, the two of you tried to pull all these underhanded tricks. Since you think she's beneath you, then try to become better than her. All you have been doing is indulging in your desires because you're my daughter. I would like to see how arrogant you can be without your status." Crystal was completely dumbfounded. Tatiana nudged at her, beckoning for her to get on her knees and admit her mistakes. "Dad, I've learned my lesson now. Please don't send me away." "You've learned? How can you possibly learn with that empty head of yours? Do you know how much effort it took me to clean up the mess you made at the banquet last time? Crystal, I've tried to lead you onto the straight and narrow, but I'm all out of ideas since you never learn. I can't seem to get through to you. I'm done. I'm giving up on being your father." Chapter 1177. Crystal finally started to feel fear. Her father had always been strict. Back when the siblings were young, she saw Mason stripping Linus, top. Then, he had him kneel on the snow as he whipped him. Mason tolerated her behavior repeatedly because she was a woman and didn't get to grow up by his side. But the incident today was the last straw. Mason had enough. Linus rushed over after he sent the guests away. After all, no one would be in the mood for food after an incident like that. As soon as he stepped into the room, he heard Tatiana and Crystal crying. "What's going on? Linus, you're here just in time. You've always doted on me. Please talk to Dad. He wants to disown me." Linus frowned. He was a little confused. "Dad, Crystal may have been in the wrong today, but isn't this too harsh of a punishment? How would she survive on her own? If she can't survive on her own, how is Olivia able to become a renowned doctor? Her family went bankrupt, and both her parents are dead." As soon as he said that, Linus looked at him. "Dad, how do you know all that?" Linus' impression of Olivia was that she was the ex-wife that Ethan loved deeply. He had only learned about Olivia's background in the past couple of days and just found out how hard her life had been. But Mason was able to talk about her background so casually despite only knowing of her identity moments ago. Naturally, Linus didn't know that Mason saw Olivia's face the first time Ethan brought Olivia to the awards banquet. Mason saw her face on the news because it was reported on a national scale. So, he looked into Olivia in private. He only dropped it after confirming that Jeff couldn't possibly be related to him. Then, Olivia disappeared for 3 years. She finally showed up before him at the banquet. In the past, he had only seen her on television. Seeing her in person caused him to lose his composure because it felt like he was reunited with an old acquaintance. Everyone felt Mason's attitude toward Olivia was weird. "I don't have to explain myself to you. Crystal, I'll give you one night to pack up. I don't want to see your dumb face in my house from tomorrow onward." Tatiana wanted to try to talk Mason out of it. "Mason, She's my daughter after all. Before she could finish, Mason cut her off. Anyone who tries to persuade me to let her stay can pack up and go with her. Tatiana fell silent immediately. There was no use talking to him while he was still in a bad mood. Mason looked at Linus and said, "Get a car ready. I'm heading out." Linus wasn't weak or emotional like his sister. He quickly composed himself. "Yes, father. Where are you going, Mason?" Mason shook her arm away. "None of your business." He put on his coat and walked outside. Crystal grabbed Tatiana's arm with tears in her eyes and pleaded with her. "What do I do, Mom? Dad is furious with me. It's because of all the things you've done. I can't help you this time. Your dad was already on the verge of losing it last time. You're really too stupid." Tatiana didn't understand why her daughter could be so dumb. "I didn't want to do it either. It's all Yale's fault. He told me I could have exposed that bitch. I didn't know she was Olivia. Your dad is actually seriously angry this time. Pack your stuff and go live with your grandma for a few days. Come back when your father is in a better mood. You can also go to the villa on the south side of the city. I'll send some maids to take care of you there." Chapter 1178. Tatiana was a little distracted. Rather than Crystal, she was more worried about Manson's attitude toward Olivia. It felt like he knew Olivia. It was still snowing outside, and Linus was driving. All the cars around him made way for him. He looked at Mason through the rearview mirror. Mason was looking out the window with a stern expression as if deep in thought. "Dad, do you know Miss Fordham?" Mason sighed softly but didn't respond. Linus' fingers tightened around the steering wheel. He had a feeling that something big was about to happen. Olivia went back to her room to change into some casual clothes. Ethan hugged her tightly as soon as they entered the room. He didn't want to let go of her. "That's enough. We haven't even eaten yet. I'll cook something up. Let me go." Ethan nestled against her neck like a puppy. "Okay." Olivia hadn't been staying here for some time. The vegetables in the fridge had already gone bad. She had no choice but to get some instant pasta from the fridge. She quickly finished cooking the pasta. She pushed a plate toward Ethan. "That's the best I can do with what we've got." The ferocity on Ethan's face had faded for some time. His hair had been drenched, but it was nearly dry. He didn't look as intense as he usually was. He had a tender expression on his face. "Liv, this is the kind of life I want. No matter how hard things get outside, there will always be a light waiting for me." He clasped her hand and said, "I didn't cherish you in the past. That was my fault. Give me another chance, Liv. I will give you a home." He looked at her with a pleading expression. He had changed a lot in the days Olivia had been with him. He didn't even care if he offended the Heaths. He would stand up for her no matter what. Olivia could see her own reflection in his eyes. The doorbell rang before she could reply. She could see a fleet of black cars parked outside from the doorbell camera. Olivia didn't expect the Heaths to come so soon. Just as she was thinking about how she would turn them away, she saw someone opening the door and slowly walking toward her door. Mason's face showed up on the camera. There was some snow on him. He looked at the camera with a kind expression. "It's me, Vanessa." Olivia was stunned. "Mr. Heath is here in person." Even Ethan didn't expect this. They weren't able to sit around and eat the pasta anymore. They got up and went to meet Mason at the door. The door was opened. Linus was holding an umbrella for Mason. The lights at the entrance shone on them. Mason's white hair could be seen clearly. "Mr. Heath, you didn't have to come in person," Olivia said resignedly. But she still went over to him. It was very cold, and the roads were slippery. It would look bad for her if he slipped and fell here. Mason grabbed her hand with a delighted expression. "If I didn't come, you might actually go away." Ethan was still a little angry. "It's cold outside. Let's talk inside." He was trying to act like the man of the house. Linus had the urge to ask why he could be so shameless. He was clinging to Olivia despite the fact that they were divorced. But he wasn't Crystal. He suppressed that thought and walked into the house with them. As soon as they entered the house, Mason looked around. It was like he was trying to understand Olivia better. The smell of pasta lingered in the room. Mason spoke up. "Vanessa, it's all Crystal's fault. Because of her, You two left before you were able to get a bite. I hope you two didn't catch a cold. We're fine. You came over so quickly, Mr. Heath. You also haven't eaten yet, right? Mason held her hand tightly. Vanessa, I like it better when you call me Grandpa Mason. What was the question you didn't get to ask that day at the tea room? Chapter 1179. There aren't any ingredients at home. This is all I can make for you. It's fine. It's nice to switch things up occasionally. Mason seemed to be very easygoing. There were no housekeepers in this house. Ethan took up the job of washing the dishes. He picked up the plates that the others used. Linus frowned. Although the two of them were divorced, it seemed like their relationship didn't really change. Olivia brewed some tea for Mason and Linus. Then, she sat down and said, "Since it's getting late, I'll make it short. I happened to see a picture in your drawer. It was a picture of a woman. Is that woman called Natalie?" Mason's expression visibly changed after hearing that name. He grabbed Olivia's arm excitedly. "Do you know her? How are you related to her? Was her speculation wrong?" Olivia shook her head. "Honestly, I don't know who she is. But you, a few years ago, I suddenly found out that I wasn't my father's biological daughter. I know nothing about my birth parents. Then, I met an old lady out of pure coincidence. She told me that I looked like someone she knew. She was the one who told me about Miss Nat." What happened next? Mason grabbed her hand with an urgent expression. Where is Natalie now?" That old lady was already very old. She was illiterate and wasn't always in her right mind. She wasn't able to provide much useful information. We found Warlot Street in Seaburg City. The house there had already been torn down. There was a nursing home in its place. The only proof that she was telling the truth was the cherry tree at the gate. We don't know where Miss Nat has gone. Olivia sighed. As you know, those were turbulent times. The warlords ran rampant. A lot of data wasn't preserved. There also weren't any registrations. It's very hard to find a person. I don't even know where my birth parents are. Since I look like Miss Nat, I wondered if we could be related." Olivia explained all she knew in a concise manner. Then, she shifted the subject to Mason. "I saw the cherry tree when I arrived at the Heath residence. Very few families grow cherry trees at home. You also felt like the angel food cake I made tasted familiar. Then, there's the picture in the tea room. I had to wonder if you knew Miss Nat." Olivia took the old picture out of her wallet. "Please look at this." Mason looked at the picture of an elegant woman sitting under the cherry tree. She had her head raised, looking at the young man picking cherries above her. He looked away from the woman with great effort. His gaze fell on the date. He looked at the young man on the tree. A thought formed in his head. Could it be? Noticing that Mason was getting emotional, Olivia quickly said, "Don't get worked up, Mr. Heath. We can talk about it." Mason didn't reply. Instead, he beckoned toward Linus. Seeing that Mason was so excited that his arms were shaking, Linus asked, "How can I help, Dad?" Mason's lips were quivering. Olivia handed him a glass of water. He calmed down slightly. He grabbed Linus' arm. "Linus, get a DNA test done quickly for Vanessa and me." Linus started to feel uneasy. "Why, Dad?" Chapter 1180. Mason has always been a meticulous man. There wasn't any proof to show that he was related to Olivia. That was why he didn't explain anything and urged Linus to get the DNA test done. Since they couldn't be father and daughter, they could only do a DNA test to determine if they shared the same lineage. Olivia had only wanted to ask if he knew Miss Nat. She didn't expect to get a DNA test. "Mr. Heath, you're my..." Olivia was starting to feel uneasy as well. Mason was afraid that he would be disappointed by the results. If he had known that Jeff wasn't Olivia's biological father, he would have gotten this DNA test sooner. It was a pity that Chloe didn't reveal the truth before she died. Jeff also died very suddenly. That was why everyone else thought Olivia was their child. Mason grabbed her hand tightly. "You don't have to overthink it now. Just give a strand of your hair to Linus." She was about to pluck her hair but remembered that she had dyed it. She was afraid the results might be inaccurate, so she provided some other DNA samples. Linus sent the samples to be tested personally. He did so with a heavy heart. All these years, Mason and Tatiana maintained a respectful relationship. Mason was a good father. He was good to his wife, too. Although he was strict toward Linus, he never forgot to show him some love. Linus felt like Mason cared for Tatiana out of responsibility. In the times that they argued, Linus learned that his father once loved a woman deeply. That was all he knew. He didn't know the woman's whereabouts or her identity. Looking at the samples in his hand, he knew Mason's image in his heart would be shattered if Olivia was really related to him. The wait was long. Mason didn't tell Olivia about Miss Nat. Instead, he looked at her and Ethan. "Are you two still together?" Ethan took off the apron. He looked like a loving husband. The more accurate description is that I'm pursuing her. He took the cup of warm water Olivia handed him and took a sip. Then, he sat down across Mason. "I've done many things that broke her heart in the past. I've heard about that." Mason abruptly commented on their relationship. "You were a horrible man." Ethan was at a loss for words. He suddenly felt like Mason's attitude toward him had changed. In the past, Mason was his mentor and superior and would treat him courteously. At that moment, it was like Mason had seen past their status and was reprimanding him like a family member. Ethan felt uneasy. If Olivia were really related to Mason, then Mason would really be her grandfather. He would be doomed because of how Mason was fiercely protective of his own. Who would expect that Olivia would be connected to one of the most powerful men in the country? Olivia had been through a lot of ups and downs. She was the most composed person in the room. She didn't mind if Mason was her relative or not. "Mr. Heath, it would take a few hours for the DNA test to be done. Will you be resting here or heading home? It is getting late." Mason wasn't in the mood to rest. All he could think about was the possibility that Olivia might be her granddaughter. Based on the date in the picture, the child on the tree should be his son. He didn't know that Natalie was pregnant when they parted ways. It was no wonder that she was accompanied by an old lady without a man by her side. How did she survive while taking care of a child during those turbulent times? Mason closed his eyes as he recalled the promise made to Natalie. He wanted her to become the most revered woman in the world when he became someone important. He attained the status he wanted, but Natalie was nowhere to be seen.